I was holding a paper plate with half-eaten cupcakes when my mother's voice cut through the laughter and clinking of plastic cups. She was standing near the baby gift table, champagne glass in hand, smiling sweetly as she delivered a sentence that punched me in the stomach in front of a room full of family and strangers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At least this baby has a father, she said, her tone smooth. As silk, but sharp as glass. A few people chuckled awkwardly. Others went silent. My eyes locked with hers for just a second, and I saw it. The cold satisfaction she always wore when she thought she'd put me in my place. Before I could even react, my Aunt Denise, my mom's sister and her lifelong partner in passive-aggressive warfare, laughed and added, unlike her sister's bastard child. Her voice was loud enough to make sure everyone heard it. I froze. The paper plate in my hand bent under the pressure of my grip. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My 9-year-old daughter, Emma, had been just behind me, excitedly hovering near the punch bowl with the small gift bag she'd picked out herself. She heard every word, and before I could blink, before I could collect myself, she walked past me with that bag in her hand, straight toward my mother. "Grandma," she said, voice steady, small fingers gripping the bag tightly. "I got something for you. Dad told me to give you this." The entire room went dead quiet. Let me back up a little. My name is Sophia. I'm 28. I'm a single mom, and I've been raising my daughter Emma on my own since she was a baby. Her father, James, died just a year after Emma was born. Complications from a heart condition that came out of nowhere. He passed during a surgery that was supposed to be routine. We were young, we were scared, but we were in love. And when he died, a part of me was buried with him. Since then, it's just been me and Emma. We've been through it all together, moving, struggling, late nights, hand-me-downs, scraped knees, laughter in small kitchens. She's my world, and I've done everything in my power to give her a life filled with love, even when my own heart felt broken beyond repair. But my family never saw it that way. They saw a girl who got pregnant too young. A girl who made a mistake. A girl who should have done better. Especially my mom, Marlene. She never forgave me for not marrying someone else after James died. For not fixing the shame she thought I brought to her name. To her, being a single mother is worse than being widowed. It's weakness. It's failure. It's proof that I didn't do things the right way. Like my younger sister, Kiara. Kiara, the golden child. The one who waited. The one who got married. The one who invited me and Emma to her baby shower with a cute little invite that said, Auntie Sophia and Cousin Emma. I remember holding that invitation in my hand and feeling hopeful. Maybe this time things would be different. Maybe the past would stay in the past. Maybe we'd be treated like family. We arrived at the shower with a handmade blanket I'd stayed up 3 nights sewing and a book Emma chose herself, Love You Forever, because she said she wanted her baby cousin to know how to love their mommy. But none of that mattered once. My mother opened her mouth. All it took was 2 sentences, 2 cruel, calculated lines, one from my mother, one from her sister. And in that moment, I felt smaller than I'd felt in years. But my daughter didn't. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She stood up. She walked. She spoke. And what she gave her, what she gave all of them, was something they never expected. That day, my family tried to shame me. But Emma reminded me who I really am. And what happened next changed everything. The morning of my sister's baby shower started out like any other Saturday. I made pancakes for Emma, even though I barely slept the night before. She was buzzing with excitement, asking 100 questions about what the baby's name might be, if she'd get to hold it, and whether we could stay long enough to eat cake. I smiled through it all, nodding, laughing, trying to be present, but my stomach was twisted in knots. I didn't want to go. I hadn't wanted to RSVP in the first place. When the pastel pink and gold invitation showed up in my mailbox 3 weeks earlier, I stared at it for a long time. The envelope was addressed to Sophia and Emma, handwritten in Kiara's neat cursive. It was sweet, thoughtful, maybe even genuine. But I knew better than to assume I'd be welcome just because I was invited. My relationship with my family has always been complicated. My mom, Marlene, raised us with a strict hand and a sharper tongue. Appearances mattered more than anything: reputation, order, respectability. Kiara learned how to play that game early on. I didn't. I never could. I was the rebel, the one who challenged her rules, the one who got pregnant at 19 and shamed her in front of the church. Even after James died, I was never treated with grace. There were no embraces, no casseroles dropped off, no, "How are you holding up?" Just tight-lipped condolences and sideways glances and eventually silence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Still, I showed up because Kiara asked me to. Because Emma wanted to be there. Because part of me, maybe the most naive, hopeful part, thought that maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of something different. We spent the night before wrapping gifts. Emma chose a baby book from the store, Love You Forever. I cried the first time I read that book to her when she was little. She said, "I think this baby should know how to love their mommy." I don't know how a 9-year-old can be that thoughtful, but somehow she always has been. I also spent 3 nights sewing a baby blanket. Soft fleece with little ducks on it. Neutral, sweet, warm. It wasn't fancy, but it was handmade with love. And I knew Kiara would appreciate it. She always appreciated the things I made, even if our mom never did. The shower was at a local community hall just outside the city. We pulled up in my beat-up Toyota, and Emma grabbed the gift bag with both hands, careful not to bend it. Her little sneakers squeaked as she jogged to the door ahead of me. When we stepped inside, the first thing I saw was how beautiful it all looked. Gold balloons, delicate streamers, little cupcakes with pink frosting, tables lined with glittery confetti, and vases filled with fresh flowers. There was even a banner that read, "Welcome, Baby Amara." I felt a lump in my throat. It was beautiful. It really was. And for a second, I let myself believe we might have a good day. Kiara greeted us with a big hug. She looked radiant. Her belly had popped, and she was glowing in a way I never was when I was pregnant. Not because I couldn't, but because I wasn't allowed to feel beautiful. My pregnancy was seen as a stain, not a celebration. I wasn't given parties or presents. I wasn't given joy. But I was happy for her. Honestly, I've never envied my sister's life. Not really. I just wished I didn't feel like a ghost in her world. We found a table near the back. Emma was immediately drawn to the snack table, especially the punch. I helped her pour a cup, and we stood together for a while, just people watching. I could feel the glances, the quick smiles that didn't reach the eyes. I was used to it. That part didn't surprise me. But what did surprise me was how Emma didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't care. She laughed when someone made a balloon animal. She waved at Kiara when she passed. She clutched that little gift bag in her hands like it held something sacred. And maybe it did. She had tucked something inside that I hadn't seen yet. Something she said she wanted to give to Grandma. I didn't ask what it was. I figured it was. A picture she drew, maybe a note. I didn't think twice, but I would soon learn that gift wasn't just paper and ink. It was truth. And it was about to tear through decades of shame like a match to dry grass. I remember watching my sister open her gifts one after another, glowing under the soft lighting of the room, her laughter bouncing off the walls. People clapped for tiny outfits, cooed over pacifiers shaped like animals, and awed at diaper cakes wrapped in satin ribbon. And then it was our turn. Kiara pulled our gift bag toward her. She smiled as she pulled out the baby blanket, the one I spent 3 nights sewing with fingers that were sore and stiff by the end. She unfolded it, ran her hand over the soft fleece, and looked up at me with genuine warmth. "Sophia, this is beautiful," she said. Then she reached inside and found the book Emma had picked. "Love You Forever." "Oh, this one makes me cry every time," she said, holding it up. "Thank you, Emma." People gave a light round of polite claps. One woman even muttered, "Sweet," under her breath. But the moment was short-lived, because then my mother stood up, with a glass of champagne in her hand and the smile of someone who always saves her sharpest blade for dessert. She cleared her throat. "Before we move on," she said, "I just want to say how proud I am of Kiara." Her voice was syrupy and loud, her words slow and intentional. "She's doing everything right. She waited. She built a home. She married a good man. And now she's bringing a baby into a stable 2-parent family the way it's supposed to be." There were nods, a few cheers. Some people genuinely agreed, others seemed unsure. I felt the first sting of shame tighten around my chest. My fingers clenched the edge of the table. Then came the knife. "At least this baby has a father," she added, looking directly at me. My heart stopped. I looked away, pretending to sip punch, pretending I didn't hear her, pretending I wasn't bleeding on the inside. But she knew I heard. Everyone did. And as if that weren't enough, my Aunt Denise let out a sharp, high-pitched laugh and added, "Unlike her sister's bastard child?" The word echoed in my ears. Bastard! It hit me like a brick to the chest. My ears rang. I felt every pair of eyes glance in my direction, then quickly look away. No one said anything. No one stood up for me. Not Kiara, not my cousin, not a single soul. And worst of all, Emma heard it. I felt her small body stiffen beside me. I turned to look at her. Her eyebrows were scrunched, her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't say anything, but I could see the questions forming in her head. Why would Grandma say that? Why is Aunt Denise laughing? Why is everyone looking at us like that? I could barely breathe. The pressure in my chest was unbearable, and my throat felt like it was closing. I was humiliated, but more than that, I was furious. Furious at how easily they reduced my daughter, my bright, kind, beautiful girl, to a slur. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm out. I wanted to grab the mic and list every sacrifice I'd made to raise Emma on my own. I wanted to tell them how James, her father, had died trying to survive a condition no one saw coming. I wanted them to choke on the truth. But I didn't say a word, because I knew if I did, they'd spin it as another outburst. Another sign that I was emotional, unstable, dramatic. I just sat there, numb. And then I saw Emma stand up. She picked up the small gift bag she had kept aside since we arrived, the one she had labeled "to Grandma" in her blocky 9-year-old handwriting. I reached for her instinctively. "Baby, don't," I whispered, but she shook her head gently, eyes locked on my mom. "I got something for you, Grandma," she said, walking toward her. "Dad told me to give you this." The entire room turned silent. Marlene blinked at her, confused. Her hand lowered the champagne glass as she took the gift from her. Inside that bag was something I didn't even know existed. Something James had left behind. And in the next few moments, everything would change. I watched Emma walk across the room like the weight of the world wasn't resting on her tiny shoulders. Her back was straight, chin up, steps steady. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the whispers already starting to spread through the baby shower. She was just a girl, 9 years old, small for her age, with curly hair that never seemed to stay put, and eyes too wise for someone who still asked for extra marshmallows in her cocoa. She shouldn't have had to carry this moment, But there she was, standing in front of my mother, her grandmother, holding out a small white gift bag with a red bow, as calm as if she were offering her a cookie. "I got something for you," she said. "Dad told me to give you this." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows lifted slightly. She looked at the bag like it might bite her. Then she glanced over at me, cold, confused, maybe even nervous. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body was frozen in place, but every nerve was screaming. I had no idea what was in that bag. We had packed the baby gift together, the book, the blanket. But that bag, that was something Emma had packed on her own. She told me it was a surprise. I assumed it was a drawing, or maybe a letter, something innocent and sweet. I hadn't checked it because, honestly, I didn't think much of it. Now I realized I should have, because whatever it wasn't just for Grandma. It was a message. My mother took the bag from her hand and pulled out 2 items. The first was a framed photo. She stared at it for a moment, confused, and then her mouth pressed into a thin, hard line. The photo was of me and James, Emma's father. It had been taken just a few weeks before his surgery. We were sitting on the grass in a park, our hands intertwined over my pregnant belly. I was 19. He was 21. There was so much love in that picture it hurt to look at. And underneath that photo, folded neatly in half, was a letter, not from Emma, but from James. She opened it slowly, and I watched her eyes scan the page. I saw something flicker in her expression. Discomfort, maybe even guilt. It was brief, but I caught it. That letter was something James had written before his surgery, just in case. I didn't know Emma had it. I barely remembered it existed. She must have found it in the shoebox where I kept old letters and photos. I hadn't opened it in years. I couldn't bring myself to, but my daughter had. And somehow she had known that this moment, this one, was the right time for it. My mother read silently, but I could imagine every word. James had written about how proud he was of me, how scared he was that he might not come back, but how sure he was that I would be an amazing mother no matter what happened. He called Emma our miracle. He told me that no matter how the world judged me, I should never forget that I was enough, more than enough, and that anyone who made me feel otherwise was wrong. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was pure. And for the first time in a very long time, I saw the people in that room stop and look at me differently. No one spoke. Even Aunt Denise, queen of smug comments, had nothing to say. Then Emma, my little girl, looked right at my mother and said, "He loved me. He loved my mom. That means I'm not a mistake." There was no anger in her voice, no shame, just truth. And in that moment, the power in the room shifted. Not in a loud, explosive way, in a quiet, undeniable way. My mother blinked quickly, lips parting like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. She just stood there, holding a letter from the son-in-law she had never acknowledged. Forced to face the reality she spent nearly a decade pretending didn't exist. Emma turned around and walked back to me. I knelt down and hugged her so tightly, I thought I might never let go. I didn't have to fight back. She already did it for me. That moment, that simple, brave act, cracked the facade my mother had built around me for years. And even if she didn't crumble right away, she wasn't in control anymore. My mother stood there, still holding the letter and the photo as if she didn't know what to do with her hands. And maybe she didn't. For the first time I could remember, Marlene, my mother, looked small. Not powerful, not in control, just caught, staring into a truth she couldn't rewrite. That room full of pastel decorations and polite family politics had gone completely silent. I could feel the air shift. People were uncomfortable, unsure whether to look at me or away. My Aunt Denise had her lips pressed so tight they turned white. She tried to glance at my mother, waiting for her to make some kind of joke, some dismissive shrug, something to brush this off like they always did, but none came. The photo was still in her hand, shaking just slightly. It was a clear picture. James's smile, warm, boyish, full of life, stared right back at her. My own younger, face beside him, full of love, unaware of what was coming. She knew exactly who he was. She had just chosen to erase him. James hadn't fit her version of what a real man should be. He wasn't rich. He wasn't raised in church. He was kind, gentle, a musician who believed in dreams over money. He had held my hand through pregnancy appointments, written lullabies to my growing belly, and cried the first time he heard Emma's heartbeat. But to her, that didn't count because he died. Because we didn't get married. Because we didn't follow her rules. And because I didn't remarry someone more acceptable afterward, she decided his love and my daughter didn't matter. Now she was face to face with a letter that proved her narrative had been a lie, and everyone saw it. I watched my cousin Kayla slowly lower her phone, which she had been recording with. Not out of malice, but instinct. She whispered to her friend, "Did you hear what that little girl just said?" Another guest near the punch table muttered, "That was powerful." Even Kiara, my sister, was crying. Not sobbing, not dramatically, just quiet tears that rolled down her cheeks as she sat with her hands in her lap, staring at her mother with a look I couldn't quite place. Disappointment maybe, or maybe just realization. And then Emma, still standing beside me, said one more thing, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "My dad died, but he was real and he loved me. And my mom. That's what matters." Simple. Words, nothing fancy, but they were everything. And the way she said them, without shame, without fear, made something break open inside me. I stood up slowly, brushing crumbs off my lap. My hands were shaking, but I didn't hide it this time. I looked at Marlene. She still hadn't moved, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to make her comfortable. I didn't apologize for the awkward silence. I didn't shrink. I didn't try to soften the moment with a smile or a joke. I just stood there, tall, visible, whole, and I said, "You don't ever get to speak about my daughter like that again." She blinked, her lips parted, maybe to protest, maybe to defend herself. But I kept going. "You ignored her because you hated how she came into this world, but you forgot one thing. She didn't ask to be here. We chose her. Her father loved her. I love her. She's not a mistake. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." I wasn't yelling. My voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The truth didn't need a megaphone. I reached for Emma's hand. She took it without hesitation. And then I turned to Kiara. "Congratulations," I said softly. "Really, I hope your child is surrounded by love. All kinds of love. Even the kind that doesn't fit in neat little boxes." She nodded. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. We walked out together, hand in hand, with every eye in the room following us. Not out of pity or curiosity, but something else. Respect. No one stopped us, not even my mother. And as we stepped into the sunlight outside that baby shower, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The car ride home was quiet, but it wasn't heavy. Emma sat in the back seat, humming a tune under her breath, legs swinging as she stared out the window. I kept glancing at her in the mirror. This little person who somehow carried the weight of generational shame and didn't let it break her. When we pulled into our apartment complex, I parked the car and just sat there with the engine off, my hand still on the wheel. "Are you mad I gave Grandma the letter?" she asked softly. I turned around to face her. "Mad?" I said. "No, baby. I'm not mad." She looked down. I didn't like what she said. I wanted her to know my dad was real. Tears welled up before I could stop them. I reached back and cupped her cheek. "You did something really brave. I'm so proud of you." And I meant it. Not just for what she did, but for how she reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I wasn't broken. I wasn't less than. I wasn't defined by who stayed or who left or who died. I was defined by the life I built. The next day, I found the shoebox where Emma had taken the letter and photo from. I hadn't opened it in years. It was tucked in the back of my closet, full of things I didn't let myself look at anymore. Ultrasound pictures, James's hospital bracelet, the receipt from the first crib we bought together. I sat on my bedroom floor with that box and cried for the first time in a long time. Not because I was sad, not because I missed James, although I did deeply, but because I finally let myself feel everything I'd pushed down for so long. I had spent years trying to be invisible. I kept my head down, smiled politely, bit my tongue every time someone made a comment about how I should have waited or how a child needs a father. But that day at the baby shower, something changed. It wasn't just about the letter. It wasn't even about my mother's cruel words. It was about finally seeing myself through Emma's eyes. The same eyes that never saw me as a failure or a burden or someone who needed to be fixed. She saw me as her mom, the person who taught her how to make grilled cheese and checked under her bed for monsters and held her through every storm. And she was proud of me. That was enough. In the weeks that followed, I didn't hear much from my mother. She sent a text a few days later. That was unnecessary. We could have handled it privately. I didn't respond. Denise never reached out, but something surprising happened. My cousin Kayla, the one who had recorded the moment, messaged me and said, "I just want you to know that was powerful. I think you're an amazing mom." She wasn't the only one. People I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages. Some shared their own stories about being single parents or about having families that never accepted them. A woman I barely knew from church DM'd, "That little girl of yours, she's a light. You did that." It didn't erase the pain. It didn't rewrite the years I'd spent aching for validation from people who refused to give it. But it helped me let go of needing it. I started therapy, not because I was falling apart, but because I finally wanted to build something new, something solid for myself, for Emma. I also started writing, journaling at first, then short essays. I didn't know what I'd do with them. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. But putting the truth into words without filters, without fear, felt like reclaiming something I didn't even realize I'd lost. And Kiara, she called a week after the shower. She cried, she apologized. She said she hadn't known what to say in the moment and that she hated herself for staying quiet. I told her the truth. "I don't need you to defend me. I need you to stop being silent." We're rebuilding, slowly, carefully, because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing who gets to come with you when you decide to stop surviving and start living. So here I am, not perfect, not polished, but free. And when I look at Emma, her whole life ahead of her, heart still open, I know this. I didn't raise a mistake. I raised a mirror. And when she stood up for me, I finally saw who I really was. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt dismissed, unseen, or underestimated, I want you to know you're not alone. Sometimes the people meant to love us the most are the ones who try to make us feel the smallest. But your worth isn't decided by their approval. It's in your truth, your resilience, and in the love you give and choose to keep around you. The most valuable lessons I've learned through this journey weren't the ones I expected. They weren't about forgiveness or letting go, though those things matter. They were about standing firm in your truth even when voices around you try to rewrite it. They were about recognizing that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to simply refuse to accept someone else's version of who you are. Every morning now, I look in the mirror and see someone different from the woman I was before that baby. Shower. Not because my circumstances changed. I'm still a single mom, still working hard, still figuring things out day by day. But because I no longer see myself through my mother's judgmental eyes. Instead, I see what Emma sees. A woman who didn't break when life got hard. A woman who built a home with her bare hands and a heart that refused to close. A woman whose worth was never tied to having a partner, but to the love she poured into raising her daughter. And that perspective has changed everything. I've started a support group for single parents in my community. It wasn't something I planned. It just happened after I shared my story online and people began reaching out. Now, every Thursday night, my small apartment fills with laughter, sometimes tears, and always understanding. We trade childcare tips, job leads, and most importantly, stories. Stories that remind us we're not defined by what we lack, but by what we've built against the odds. Emma has blossomed too. Standing up to her grandmother that day unlocked something in her. A quiet confidence that shines through everything. She does. Her teachers comment on her empathy, how she's always the first to notice when another child feels left out or hurt. She told me recently that she wants to be a counselor when she grows up, to help people who feel bad about things that aren't their fault. As for my family, the changes haven't been dramatic, but they've been real. Kiara and I talk more honestly, now. She confessed that she always admired my strength, but didn't know how to say it without seeming disloyal to our mother. She's learning to find her voice, to question the rules that shaped us both. My mother hasn't apologized. I don't expect she ever will. But the power dynamic has shifted irrevocably. The last time we saw each other, at a cousin's graduation, party! She was careful with her words. Not warm, not loving, but cautious in a way she never had to be before. She knows now that her judgments don't define me. They only reveal her. What surprises me most isn't how others have changed. It's how I've changed. I no longer rehearse arguments in my head before family gatherings. I don't anxiously plan how to respond to passive-aggressive comments. I don't spend energy trying to prove my worthiness as a mother, a daughter, a woman. Instead, I use that energy to live, to help Emma with her science project, to finish the novel I've been writing, to plant herbs on our small balcony, to laugh without wondering if I'm being too loud. If you're reading this and feeling the weight of someone else's disappointment on your shoulders, I want you to know something. You can set it down. It was never yours to carry. Your life may not look like the picture others painted for you, but that doesn't make it a failure. Sometimes the most beautiful canvases are the ones we paint ourselves, with colors no one else would have chosen. Your worth isn't measured by anyone else's yardstick. It's in the resilience you show when you get up each morning and try again. It's in the boundaries you set to protect your peace. It's in the love you give, not despite your scars, but because of them. If this resonated with you, like the video so more people can find it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this kind of story today. Comment below. Tell me your story or just say, I'm enough, so others see they're not alone either. And if you want more real, raw, and healing stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because we're building a space where truth is strength and healing is loud. Thanks for watching. I see you. I hear you. And I'm glad you're here. The morning of my sister's baby shower started out like any other Saturday, but with a cloud of anxiety hanging over me. I woke before dawn, my sleep cut short by the endless loop of imagined scenarios playing in my head. What would my mother say this time? How many subtle jabs would I have to deflect? How many pitying looks would I need to pretend not to notice? I lay in bed watching the soft glow of sunrise filter through the blinds, gathering my strength before Emma woke up. My daughter had been looking forward to this day for weeks. She'd circled the date on our kitchen calendar with a bright pink marker and had been counting down the days, excited to meet her baby cousin. By 7:30, I was in the kitchen making her favorite blueberry pancakes, the smell of butter and vanilla filling our small apartment. I was determined not to let my anxiety show. Emma deserved to enjoy this day without the weight of my complicated family dynamics. "Mom, you're making the special pancakes!" she exclaimed, her eyes bright with excitement as she bounded into the kitchen still in her pajamas, curly hair wild from sleep. "Special day, special pancakes," I said, flipping one onto her plate and drawing a smiley face with maple syrup. As we ate, Emma peppered me with questions about the baby. "Do you think it's a boy or a girl? Will the baby look like Aunt Kiara? Can I hold it when it's born? Will we go visit them in the hospital?" I answered each question with forced enthusiasm, nodding and smiling through my growing unease. "Your aunt already told us it's a girl, remember? They're naming her Amara." "Oh, right, I forgot." Emma giggled, syrup sticky on her chin. "Amara. That's such a pretty name." I watched her eat, marveling at how pure her excitement was. She had no concept of the tension that awaited us. In her world, family gatherings were simply times of celebration. She hadn't yet learned to brace herself for the sharp edges of disapproval that often cut through such occasions. After breakfast, I helped Emma pick out her outfit, a yellow sundress with tiny daisies that she'd been saving for a special occasion. As I braided her hair, I caught sight of our reflection in the mirror. She was beaming, practically vibrating with anticipation, while behind her, my own face told a different story. Eyes tinged with worry, a smile that didn't quite reach them. "You look beautiful, Mom," Emma said, catching my gaze in the mirror. For a moment, I saw myself through her eyes. Not the failure my mother saw, not the cautionary tale my relatives whispered about, but simply her mother. Beautiful. Loved. Enough. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "So do you, sweetheart." While Emma was brushing her teeth, I checked the gift bag one last time. The baby blanket I'd made was wrapped in tissue paper, alongside the book Emma had chosen. I'd spent 3 nights sewing that blanket after Emma went to bed, my fingers working the soft fleece until well past midnight. Each stitch felt like a peace offering, a silent plea for acceptance. I wondered if Kiara would understand what went into it. Not just the time, but the hope. Hope that things could be different. Hope that the baby might somehow bridge the chasm that had grown between us over the years. The drive to the community hall was quiet. Emma clutched her small purse in her lap, humming softly to herself. I gripped the steering wheel too tightly, rehearsing responses to potential comments in my head. If my mother mentioned setting me up with someone, I'm focusing on Emma and my career right now. If anyone asked about my love life, I'm exactly where I need to be. If someone made a pitying comment about Emma growing up without a father, she has all the love she needs. I had an arsenal of polite deflections ready. Years of family gatherings had taught me the art of smiling through pain, of redirecting conversation, of strategic bathroom breaks when things got too intense. But no amount of preparation could have readied me for what actually happened that day. The community hall looked like something from a magazine spread. Kiara had always had an eye for aesthetics, and her baby shower was no exception. Pastel, pink and gold decorations transformed the usually plain space into something magical. When we walked in, Emma gasped audibly. "Mom, it's so pretty," she whispered, squeezing my hand. Kiara spotted us almost immediately. She waved from across the room, her other hand resting on her rounded belly. When she made her way to us, I was struck by how radiant she looked. Pregnancy suited her. She wore a flowing dress that emphasized her bump, her hair styled in loose waves, a flush of excitement on her cheeks. "You made it!" she exclaimed, pulling me into an awkward hug, her belly creating distance between us. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, returning her embrace, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. "Aunt Kiara, you look like a princess," Emma said, wide-eyed. Kiara laughed and bent down as much as her belly would allow. And you look like a little ray of sunshine, Emma. She touched Emma's braid gently. I'm so glad you came. There are some cupcakes over there that I think you're going to love. Emma looked at me for permission, and I nodded. As she darted off toward the dessert table, Kiara lowered her voice. Mom's by the gift table. She's in rare form today. Her expression was apologetic. Just be prepared, okay? I forced a smile. When is she not? Kiara squeezed my arm before being pulled away by another guest. I took a deep breath, scanning the room for my mother. She was holding court near the gift table, champagne, flute in hand, surrounded by her church friends, all hanging on her every word. She hadn't seen me yet. I had maybe 5 minutes of peace before I'd need to greet her. I made my way to Emma, who was carefully selecting a pink frosted cupcake from an elaborate tiered stand. Those look delicious, I said, helping her place one on a small paper plate. Remember, just one for now, okay? Okay, Mom. She nodded. Seriously. I'm saving room for cake later. We found seats at a table near the back of the room, slightly removed from the center of activity. I recognized the strategic positioning for what it was, a habit formed from years of trying to minimize my presence at family functions. Sit on the periphery. Speak only when spoken to. Leave early if possible. As Emma nibbled her cupcake, I watched the room. Relatives I rarely saw except at holidays. Friends of Kiara's I didn't recognize. My Aunt Denise, my mother's sister and partner in judgment, was arranging gift bags with officious precision. The weight of being an outsider in what should have been my safe space settled on my shoulders like a familiar cloak. 8 years had passed since James died, but the sense of not belonging had never faded. If anything, it had calcified into something permanent, a barrier between me and my family that seemed increasingly insurmountable. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice my mother approaching until she was standing right beside our table. Sophia, she said, her voice carrying that unique blend of warmth and steel that had defined my childhood. I was beginning to think you might not come. I stood, accepting her air kiss. She smelled of expensive perfume and subtle disapproval. Hi, Mom. The place looks beautiful. Kiara has always had good taste, she replied, the implication hanging. Unspoken between us. Unlike you, who got pregnant at 19 with a musician with no future. She turned her attention to Emma, her expression softening slightly. Hello, Emma. My, you've grown. Emma, still innocent to the undercurrents, beamed at her grandmother. Hi, Grandma. I helped Mom make a special blanket for the baby. That's nice, dear. My mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. She glanced at the small gift bag that Emma had been carrying separately from our main gift. What's that you have there? Emma clutched it closer. It's a surprise, for later. My mother raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Well, the gift opening will be starting soon. You should bring everything to the table. As she walked away, I released the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The interaction had been brief, relatively painless by our standards. Maybe today would be different. Maybe, for Kiara's sake, my mother would keep her judgment in check. The thought had barely formed when I heard her voice, artificially loud, clearly meant to carry. Vivian, you remember my younger daughter, Kiara? Such a blessing to see her doing everything the right way. College, career, marriage, and now a baby. In that order. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing the blow. When I opened them, Emma was watching me, her forehead creased with concern. Mom? Are you okay? I forced a smile. I'm fine, sweetie. Just a little warm in here. The gift opening ceremony began about 30 minutes later. Guests gathered around Kiara's chair, which had been decorated with pink and gold streamers to look like a throne. A mountain of beautifully wrapped packages surrounded her. Emma and I stood toward the back of the crowd. She was on tiptoes, trying to see over the heads of adults. I lifted her slightly, balancing her on my hip despite her growing too big for this. "Can you see now?" I whispered. She nodded, arms wrapped around my neck. One by one, Kiara opened her gifts. There were expensive baby clothes, high-tech monitors, designer diaper bags, and enough baby books to fill a small library. With each extravagant present, the guests cooed and applauded. I felt a pang of insecurity about our handmade gift. It had seemed meaningful when I was sewing it late at night. But now, surrounded by all this opulence, it felt inadequate. Another reminder that I didn't quite measure up. When it was finally our turn, Kiara pulled our simply wrapped package from the pile. I held my breath as she carefully removed the tissue paper. "Oh," she said, unfolding the blanket. Her fingers traced the pattern of little ducks I'd embroidered in the corner. "Sophia, did you make this?" I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. "It's beautiful," she said, and I could tell she meant it. Truly beautiful. She ran her hand over the soft fleece, then held it up for everyone to see. "My sister made this by hand." There were appreciative murmurs from the crowd, but I caught several exchanged glances. Handmade gifts were charming but didn't carry the prestige of the expensive items from luxury baby boutiques. Kiara then pulled out the book. "Love You Forever." "Emma picked it out," I said quietly. My sister's eyes welled with tears as she looked at the book. This was always one of my favorites growing up. She turned to Emma. "Thank you, sweetie. This means so much to me." Emma beamed. "I thought the baby should know how to love her mommy forever and ever." A collective awe rose from the guests. Even my mother's friends seemed touched by Emma's sentiment. For a moment, I felt a flicker of belonging. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe the simple sincerity of our gift had bridged something. Then my mother stood up, glass in hand, and the flicker extinguished. "Before we continue," she announced, drawing all eyes to her, "I'd like to make a toast to my beautiful daughter Kiara." The room quieted. My mother had always commanded attention effortlessly, a skill I'd never managed to inherit. Watching. "You prepare to become a mother fills me with such pride," she continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "You've done everything right, darling. You and David have built such a solid foundation for this baby. A real home. A real family." I felt the first twist of dread in my stomach. This wasn't just a toast to Kiara. This was a comparison. And comparisons in my family had only ever served one purpose: to elevate one daughter while diminishing the other. "This child is so fortunate," my mother continued, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality that told me she'd planned these words carefully. "So blessed to be coming into a stable, two-parent household." Several guests nodded in agreement. An older woman from our church murmured, "Amen to that." "At least this baby has a father," my mother added, her eyes finding mine across the room. The statement hung in the air like a slap. I felt the blood drain from my face, my ears ringing. With the sudden shift in atmosphere, a few uncomfortable chuckles bubbled up from guests who weren't sure how to react to such a blatantly cruel comment. I might have been able to recover, to brush it off as just another of my mother's thoughtless remarks, if Aunt Denise hadn't chosen that moment to twist the knife. "Unlike her sister's bastard child," she said with a sharp laugh, loud enough to ensure everyone heard. The word bastard seemed to echo in the suddenly silent room. I felt Emma stiffen in my arms. I looked down at her face and saw the confusion give way to understanding, then hurt. She wriggled out of my grasp, her feet hitting the floor with a soft thud. I reached for her, desperate to shield her from this moment. But she was already moving away from me, toward the table where we'd left our purses. "Emma," I called, my voice barely a whisper. But she wasn't running away in tears as I feared. Instead, she picked up the small gift bag she'd brought, the one she'd kept separate, the one she'd told me was a surprise for later. I watched, frozen in place, as my 9-year-old daughter straightened her shoulders and walked directly toward my mother, who was still standing with her champagne glass, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her lips. The room had gone completely silent. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, looking between my mother and my daughter, then at me, standing helpless and humiliated in the back of the room. "Grandma," Emma said, her voice clear and steady despite her small stature. "I have something. For you. Dad told me to give you this." My mother's expression faltered. Her eyes darted to me, then back to Emma, confusion evident in the slight furrow of her brow. "Dad?" she repeated, as if the word itself was foreign. Emma nodded, holding out the small white gift bag with a red bow. "From my dad, James." I had no idea what was in that bag. Emma had prepared it herself, insisting it was a surprise. I had assumed it was a drawing or perhaps a small craft she'd made at school, but the way she said, "from my dad," sent a chill through me. My mother took the bag reluctantly, as if it might contain something unpleasant. She set her champagne glass down and peered inside, then slowly removed a framed photograph. From where I stood, I couldn't see the image, but I saw the color drain from my mother's face as she stared at it. Then, with trembling fingers, she pulled out what appeared to be a folded piece of paper. The silence in the room was absolute as she unfolded it and began to read. I saw her eyes move across the page, her expression shifting from disdain to something I'd rarely witnessed on her face. Discomfort, perhaps even shame. I moved closer, drawn by a need to understand what was happening. As I approached, I caught sight of the photograph in the frame. It was a picture of James and me, taken in the park just weeks before he died. We were sitting on a checkered blanket, his arms wrapped around me from behind, both our hands resting on my pregnant belly. We were laughing, our faces alight with joy and anticipation. It was one of the few photos I had of us together from that time, a treasure I kept in an old shoebox pushed to the back of my closet. The letter in my mother's hands, I realized with a jolt, must be the one James had written before his surgery. He'd written several, one for me, one for his parents, and, I now remembered, one for our unborn child. They were just-in-case letters, filled with love and hopes and wishes, in the event he didn't survive. I had read mine countless times, in those first dark months after his death, clinging to his words like a lifeline. But I had put away the letter for our child, deciding it would be Emma's when she was old enough to understand what she had lost. Somehow she had found it, and she had decided that today was the day to share it, not with me, but with the grandmother who had never acknowledged her father's existence. "He loved me," Emma said into the silence, her voice small but unwavering. "He loved my mom. That means I'm not a mistake." The simplicity of her statement, the pure truth of it, seemed to fill the room. I watched as my mother's carefully constructed narrative, the one where I was the cautionary tale, where my daughter was the unfortunate outcome of poor decisions, began to crumble in the face of Emma's innocent defiance. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. The letter trembled in her hand. Aunt Denise stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the shifting dynamics. "Well, isn't that sweet?" she said with forced brightness. "Now, let's get back to Kiara's gifts, shall we?" But no one moved. No one looked away from the tableau of my mother, still holding the evidence of a love she had refused to acknowledge, and my daughter, standing before her with quiet dignity. I moved to Emma's side, placing my hand on her shoulder. The touch seemed to break whatever spell had held the room captive. My mother thrust the photo and letter back into the gift bag, her composure returning like a mask sliding back into place. "Yes, well, she said briskly. Let's continue with the gifts. But it was too late. The damage, or perhaps the healing, had already begun. Something fundamental had shifted in that room. I could see it in the way people were looking at me now, not with pity or judgment, but with something like reassessment, as if they were seeing me clearly for the first time. Even more importantly, I felt something shift within myself. For years, I had accepted my role as the family disappointment. I had absorbed their narrative about my life, about my choices, about my worth. But watching Emma stand up not just for herself, but for me, for us, for our little family of two, I felt a surge of something powerful and unfamiliar. Pride. Not pride in achievements or appearances or meeting someone else's standards. Pride in the truth. In our truth. In the reality that love doesn't always follow the prescribed path, that family isn't always defined by convention, that worth isn't determined by adherence to rules. I looked down at my daughter, this remarkable, human being who somehow understood at 9 what had taken me 28 years to grasp, that we didn't need anyone's validation to be whole. Come on, sweetheart, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I think we've given Grandma enough to think about for one day. I took her hand, and together we walked through the crowd, heads high, leaving behind the shocked silence and the weight of expectations I had carried for too long. As we stepped out into the sunshine, Emma looked up at me. Did I do okay, Mom? I knelt down to her level, cupping her face in my hands. You did more than okay. You were brave and honest and exactly who you are. I couldn't be prouder. She smiled, relief washing over her face. Can we get ice cream on the way home? I laughed, the sound surprising me with its lightness. Absolutely. I think this calls for a double scoop kind of day. As we walked to the car, I felt as though I was taking my first full breath in years. We had walked away from judgment, from shame, from the need for approval that had shaped so much of my life. And in its place, I found something far more valuable. The freedom that comes with standing in your own truth, the strength that comes from knowing your own worth, and the peace that comes from accepting that some people might never see you clearly, and that's their loss, not yours. This was just the beginning of our story, Emma's and mine. And for the first time, I was truly excited to see how it would unfold, now that we were writing it for ourselves. My mother stood there still holding the letter and the photo as if she didn't know what to do with her hands, and maybe she didn't. For the first time I could remember, Marlene, my mother, looked small. Not powerful, not in control, just caught, staring into a truth she couldn't rewrite. The drive home from the baby shower was strangely peaceful. The tension that had been building in my shoulders for weeks seemed to dissolve with each mile we put between ourselves and that community hall. Emma sat in the back seat, humming softly to herself, occasionally catching my eye in the rearview mirror and smiling. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked as we approached the shopping center near our apartment. "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "I think we've earned a treat today." We sat outside the ice cream parlor, Emma with her strawberry cone and me with a scoop of mint chocolate chip. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of nearby jasmine. "Mom?" Emma said, licking a drip from her cone. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you mad at Grandma?" I considered her question carefully. Was I mad? The emotion I felt was more complex than simple anger. It was a strange mixture of hurt, relief, and something that felt surprisingly like freedom. "I'm not mad," I said finally. "I'm just tired of pretending." Emma nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. Me too. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and marveled at the wisdom in her young eyes. How had this child, barely 9 years old, developed such clarity, such courage? I had spent years trying to shield her from the sharp edges of my family's judgment, but perhaps in doing so, I had underestimated her ability to see the truth for herself. "Emma," I said, reaching across the table to take her small hand in mine, "how did you find that letter from your dad?" She looked down at her ice cream, suddenly shy. "It was when you were cleaning out the hall closet last month. You had that box of old stuff, and I saw a picture of you and Dad sticking out. After you put it back in your closet, I went and looked at it when you were in the shower." I felt a momentary pang at the thought of Emma going through that shoebox of memories alone, without me there to provide context, to answer questions. "I found the letters," she continued. "There was one with my name on it. It said, 'For my child.'" I read it. She looked up at me, suddenly worried. Was that okay? "Of course it was okay," I assured her. "That letter was for you. Your dad wanted you to have it someday. He said he might not get to meet me, but that he already loved me more than anything in the world," Emma said, reciting the words as if they were etched into her heart. "He said he chose me, that you both chose me, and that made me special." Tears welled in my eyes. "He did choose you. We both did, with our whole hearts." "That's why I wanted to give Grandma the other letter," Emma explained. "The one where Dad talked about how much he loved us. I thought maybe she didn't know." The simplicity of her reasoning took my breath away. Of course, in Emma's mind, my mother's cruelty could only be explained by ignorance. If Grandma knew how much James had loved us, how could she possibly say the things she said? "That was very brave of you," I told her. "But, sometimes people choose not to see things that don't fit with what they want to believe." Emma considered this as she finished her ice cream. "Do you think she'll be different now, after reading Dad's letter?" I didn't want to lie to her. "I don't know, sweetheart. People don't always change, even when they should. But what matters is that we know the truth. You and me, we know what's real." She nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we go home and look at more pictures of Dad? I want to hear stories about him." And so we did. That evening, we spread the contents of that old shoebox across our living room floor. Photos, letters, movie ticket stubs, the hospital bracelet James wore during his first cardiac procedure, the tiny knit hat the nurses had given us for Emma when she was born. I told her stories I'd been holding back, not out of secrecy, but out of a misguided attempt to spare us both the pain of remembering. I told her about how James played his guitar outside my dorm window the night we met, how he wrote songs about the constellations because he said they reminded him of the freckles on my nose. I told her about his laugh, deep and uninhibited, and how he couldn't cook to save his life, but made the best cinnamon toast in the world. "He used to talk to you all the time when you were in my belly," I said, showing her a picture of James kneeling before me, his hands on my pregnant stomach, his mouth close as if sharing a secret. "He was convinced you could hear him, so he would tell you about all the things he wanted to show you when you were born. The ocean, the stars, the way morning light looks when it filters through autumn leaves." Emma traced the outline of her father's face in the photograph. "He had eyes like mine." "Yes," I agreed. "Exactly like yours." We stayed up late, piecing together the man who should have been part of our lives, but whose love somehow managed to transcend his absence. By the time Emma fell asleep, curled against me on the couch, I felt something shift inside me, as if a weight I'd been carrying had finally been set down. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to fully feel the grief of losing James, without the added burden of shame my family had heaped upon that loss. I cried, quietly, so as not to wake Emma, not just for James, but for the young woman I had been, the one who thought her world had ended when he died, who had no idea of the strength she would find in raising their daughter alone. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Emma was still asleep, her arm thrown haphazardly over her head, her breathing deep and even. I watched her for a moment, this miracle who had saved me in ways she couldn't possibly understand yet. I made a decision then, standing in the soft morning light of our small living room. We were done hiding, done apologizing, done accepting less than we deserved from people who should have loved us without condition. I picked up my phone and, before I could overthink it, sent a text to my sister. Emma and I are okay. We left yesterday because we needed to, not because we wanted to hurt you. I hope your shower continued without drama. I'm happy for you, Kiara, truly. But I need you to understand something. I won't allow my daughter to grow up thinking she needs to be ashamed of who she is or how she came into this world. If you want us in your life, in your baby's life, that has to be clear. I sent the message, then put my phone down and went to make coffee. I wasn't expecting an immediate response. Kiara had always been cautious about taking sides. Always. Careful not to upset the delicate balance of our mother's approval. To my surprise, my phone buzzed less than 5 minutes later. I'm so sorry, Sophia. For yesterday. For every time I've stayed silent when Mom said something cruel. I was wrong. What Emma did was brave. What you do every day is brave. I want you both in our lives. In Amara's life. No conditions. I read the message twice, scarcely believing what I was seeing. In all our years of dancing around our mother's judgment, Kiara had never been this direct, this unequivocal in her support. A second message followed quickly. Can I come over today? Just me. I want to talk. I hesitated only briefly before replying, yes, we'll be home all day. Emma was thrilled when I told her Aunt Kiara was coming to visit. She immediately wanted to show her the pictures of James we'd been looking at the night before, to tell her all the stories I'd shared. That's a wonderful idea, I told her. I think Aunt Kiara would love to hear about your dad. Kiara arrived just after lunch, looking tired but determined. Her belly seemed even more pronounced than it had been the day before, and she cradled it protectively as she entered our apartment. I didn't sleep much, she admitted as I made her a cup of herbal tea. I kept thinking about yesterday, about all the things I should have said. We sat at our small kitchen table, Emma perched on the chair between us with the shoebox of memories at her feet. I want to show you my dad, she announced to Kiara, pulling out the photos one by one. What followed was a revelation, as Emma proudly displayed each picture, explaining who James was through a child's understanding of the stories I'd told her. I watched my sister's face transform. Tears welled in her eyes, and she reached for my hand across the table. He looks so kind, she said softly, examining a photo of James with his guitar. I wish I had known him. Me too, Emma said matter-of-factly. But Mom says I have parts of him in me, so it's like you know a little bit of him when you know me. Kiara's eyes met mine over Emma's head. Your mom is very wise, she said, and you're very lucky to have her. Emma nodded seriously. I know. After Emma had shared all her treasures, I sent her to her room to work on a drawing she wanted to make for the baby. Once she was out of earshot, Kiara leaned forward, her expression earnest. I need to tell you something, she said. After you left yesterday, something happened. I braced myself, assuming my mother had said something even worse in our absence. I stood up to Mom, Kiara said, a note of wonder in her voice. For the first time in my life, I actually told her she was wrong. I stared at her, unable to fully process what she was saying. You did what? After you and Emma left, everyone was just standing there, not knowing what to say. Mom tried to act like nothing had happened, like we should just continue with the gifts. But I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. She took a deep breath, her hand absently stroking her belly as she spoke. I told her that what she said was cruel and untrue. I told her that Emma is a wonderful child, and that being a single mother doesn't make you less of a parent. I told her that if she couldn't respect you and Emma, she would have limited access to her new granddaughter as well. I sat back in my chair, stunned. You said that? In front of everyone? Kiara nodded, a small, defiant smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I did. And do you know what's strange? It felt good. Terrifying, but good. How did she react? Not well, as you can imagine. She tried to dismiss it as hormone-induced hysteria. Said I'd feel differently once the baby was here, and I understood the importance of proper family values. Kiara rolled her eyes. But then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Chen, you remember her from church? She stood up and said she agreed with me. Mrs. Chen had been my mother's friend for as long as I could remember, a pillar of the community, a woman whose approval my mother had always courted. She said that she had watched you raise Emma with grace and strength, and that your love for her was evident to anyone with eyes to see. She said that in her culture, a mother who raises a child alone after the death of her spouse is honored, not shamed. Tears pricked my eyes. I had no idea Mrs. Chen had been watching, seeing, understanding. Then others started speaking up. Kiara continued. Cousin Jen said she'd always admired how you balanced work and motherhood. Uncle Rick's wife mentioned how polite and thoughtful Emma always is at family gatherings. Even David's mother, who, let's be honest, is usually just as judgmental as Mom, said that what happened to you could happen to anyone, and that you'd done an admirable job under difficult circumstances. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All these years I had assumed everyone in our extended family and social circle shared my mother's view of me, the disappointment, the cautionary tale. It had never occurred to me that they might have been forming their own opinions, seeing the reality of my life rather than the narrative my mother had constructed. Mom left early, Kiara said with a small shrug. She claimed she had a migraine. Coming on, Aunt Denise went with her, of course, but the rest of us— It was actually nice after they left. People shared stories about single parents they knew who had done amazing jobs. Mrs. Chen told us about raising her son alone after her husband died in a car accident. She reached across the table and took my hand. I'm so sorry, Sophia. I'm sorry it took me this long to stand up for you. I was always so afraid of losing Mom's approval that I forgot what really matters. And what's that? I asked softly. The truth, she said simply. The truth matters, and the truth is, you're an amazing mother. Emma is an incredible kid, and I want my daughter to know her aunt and her cousin for who they really are, not who Mom thinks they should be. We talked for hours that afternoon, filling in the gaps of years spent living in the same family but experiencing it so differently. Kiara confessed her own fears about motherhood, her worry that she wouldn't measure up to the impossible standards our mother had set. I shared the isolation I had felt, the way shame had become a shadow I couldn't seem to shake. It stops now, Kiara declared as she prepared to leave. With us, it stops. Our daughters are going to grow up knowing they're loved exactly as they are. No conditions, no impossible standards. I walked her to the door, my heart lighter than it had been in years. Thank you, I said, for coming today, for saying what you said at the shower. It means more than you know. She hugged me awkwardly, her belly between us. Emma's letter from James. Do you think I could read it someday? I'd like to know the man who helped create such an amazing niece. Of course, I replied. We'll share it with you. All of it. After Kiara left, I found Emma in her room, surrounded by colored pencils, working intently on her drawing. She looked up as I entered. Is Aunt Kiara gone? Yes, sweetheart. She had to go home to rest. Emma held up her drawing for me to see. It was a family portrait, a woman with a baby, a man with his arm around her, and to the side, another woman and a girl, all holding hands. "That's Aunt Kiara and Uncle David with baby Amara," she explained, pointing to the figures. "And that's us. I made us all holding hands because we're family, even if we live in different houses." I sat down beside her on the bed, looking at the drawing with its bright colors and hopeful vision of connection. "It's beautiful, Emma. I think Aunt Kiara will love it." "Mom?" Emma said, setting down her pencil. "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "I think Grandma is sad." Her observation caught me off guard. "What makes you say that?" Emma furrowed her brow, considering her words carefully. "She's always trying to make things perfect, but nothing is ever perfect enough. Even when Aunt Kiara does everything right, Grandma still looks for more things to fix. It must be sad to never think anything is good enough." Out of the mouths of babes. I had spent years feeling judged by my mother, feeling like I would never measure up. It had never occurred to me to pity her for the prison of perfectionism she had built for herself. "That's very insightful, Emma," I said. "Sometimes people who are hardest on others are also very hard on themselves." "Do you think she'll ever change?" It was the same question she had asked at the ice cream parlor, but now I heard it differently. Not as a hope that my mother would suddenly become the warm, accepting grandmother Emma deserved, but as a genuine curiosity about whether people locked in patterns of judgment and control could find their way to something better. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Change is difficult, especially as people get older. But I do know that we can change how we respond to her. We can set boundaries. We can choose not to let her words define us." Emma nodded, processing, "This? Like how I gave her Dad's letter?" "Exactly like that. You showed tremendous courage yesterday. You stood in your truth, even when it was scary." She smiled, a small, proud smile that made my heart swell. "I wasn't that scared," she admitted. "I just knew Dad would want Grandma to know he was real, that he loved us." In that moment, I saw James in her so clearly, his quiet determination, his unwavering sense of right and wrong, his ability to act from a place of love even in the face of judgment. These weren't just traits she had developed despite her circumstances. They were her inheritance, passed down from a father who had loved her enough to write her a letter from the edge of life, ensuring she would know her own worth even if he wasn't there to tell her himself. "Your dad would be so proud of you," I told her, my voice thick with emotion. So proud." "He'd be proud of you too, Mom," she said with certainty. "For taking care of me, for making pancakes even when you're sad, for sewing that blanket. For Aunt Kiara's baby, even though Grandma is mean to you." Her words struck me like a revelation. All these years I had been carrying not only the grief of losing James, but the weight of what might have been, the family we should have had, the life that was cut short. I had been so focused on what Emma had lost in not having her father, that I hadn't fully acknowledged what she had gained. A mother who would move mountains for her, who would face down judgment and shame to create a life filled with love. I pulled her into my arms, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her small body against mine. "I love you, Emma. More than anything in this world." "I love you too, Mom," she replied, her arms tightening around my neck. "We're going to be okay, right?" "Yes," I said, and for the first time in years I believed it with my whole heart. "We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be extraordinary." That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat down at our small kitchen table with a notebook and began to write. Not a letter, not a journal entry, but a manifesto of sorts. A declaration of the truths I wanted to live by moving forward. I am not defined by others' expectations. My worth is not determined by relationship status. Single motherhood is not a failure, but a demonstration of strength. Emma is not a mistake, but a miracle. James's death was a tragedy, not a judgment. I am enough, exactly as I am. I wrote until the words blurred before my eyes, until the knot that had lived in my chest for years began to loosen and dissolve. I wrote for the young woman I had been, terrified and alone with a newborn and a fresh grave to tend. I wrote for Emma, who deserved to grow up with a mother who stood tall in her own truth. And I wrote for the woman I was becoming, one who was finally ready to shed the shame that had never belonged to her in the first place. When I finally went to bed, I felt different, lighter, somehow. As if in writing down my truths, I had made them more real, more tangible, more possible. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. My mother wouldn't change overnight, if she changed at all. There would still be family gatherings fraught with tension, comments that cut deep, moments when the old shame threatened to return. But something fundamental had shifted. I had witnesses now, Kiara, Mrs. Chen, others who had spoken up at the shower. Most importantly, I had Emma, my fierce defender, my mirror, showing me a strength I had possessed all along but had somehow forgotten. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself thinking of James's letter to Emma, the one she had found in the shoebox. He had written it knowing he might not survive, wanting to leave her with the certainty of his love. I wondered what he would think of her now, of the way she had stood up not just for herself but for me, for him, for the truth of our small but mighty family. I liked to think he would recognize himself in her courage, that he would see how his love, though brief in earthly terms, had created ripples that continued to spread outward, touching lives, changing hearts, healing wounds. And in that thought, I found a peace I hadn't known was possible. A sense that perhaps our story, though not the one I would have chosen, was still beautiful in its own right. Still worthy. Still full of love. The car ride home was quiet, but it wasn't heavy. Emma sat in the back seat, humming a tune under her breath, legs swinging as she stared out the window. I kept glancing at her in the mirror. This little person who somehow carried the weight of generational shame and didn't let it break her. 3 weeks passed after the baby shower incident. 3 weeks of relative silence from my mother, which wasn't surprising. Marlene had always wielded silence as skillfully as she wielded words, but the quiet didn't feel oppressive this time. Instead, it felt like space to breathe, to reassess, to rebuild. On a bright Tuesday morning, I dropped Emma off at school and headed to my job at the community library. I'd been working there since Emma started kindergarten. The hours aligned perfectly with her school schedule, and my boss, Eleanor, had always been understanding about sick days and school events. "Morning, Sophia," Eleanor called as I hung my jacket in the staff room. "How are you doing today?" "I'm good, actually," I replied, realizing with some surprise that it was true. "Really good." Eleanor studied me over her reading glasses. She was in her 60s, with silver hair she never bothered to dye, and wisdom earned through decades of her own struggles and triumphs. "You look different," she observed. "Lighter, somehow." I smiled, arranging the new display of children's books we'd received. "I feel lighter. Something happened a few weeks ago, and it's like, I don't know how to explain it. Like I finally put down a heavy backpack I didn't even realize I was carrying. I hadn't told many people about what happened at the shower. It felt too personal, too raw. But Eleanor had been more than a boss to me over the years. She'd been a mentor, sometimes even a surrogate mother figure. "Want to grab coffee on lunch break?" she asked. Sounds like something worth sharing. Over sandwiches and coffee in the small cafe next to the library, I told Eleanor everything. My mother's cutting remarks, Aunt Denise's cruelty, Emma's unexpected response with the letter and photo, and the aftermath with Kiara. Eleanor listened, without interrupting, her eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Your daughter," she said, "is extraordinary." "She really is," I agreed, feeling the familiar swell of pride. I still don't know how she knew exactly what to do in that moment. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, considering this. Children see more than we give them credit for. They might not understand all the adult complexities, but they recognize truth and falsehood. Emma knew her father loved her. She knew her mother loved her. She knew your mother's words weren't aligned with that truth. She took a sip of her coffee before continuing. But you know what I find even more remarkable than her standing up to your mother? What's that? The fact that she could do it with such confidence, such certainty in her own worth. That doesn't come from nowhere, Sophia. That comes from you, from the home you've created, from the way you've raised her to know her value isn't dependent on anyone else's approval. I felt tears well up unexpectedly. I've tried so hard to protect her from feeling the way I felt growing up, to shield her from my mother's judgment, from the whispers and looks. You've done more than protect her, Eleanor said firmly. You've empowered her. There's a difference. Protection can sometimes unintentionally teach fear. Empowerment teaches strength. Her words stayed with me for the rest of the day, through shelving books and helping patrons and leading the afternoon children's story hour. I had always seen my parenting through the lens of what I was trying to prevent, trying to keep Emma from feeling the shame that had been heaped on me. But perhaps in the process, I had done something far more important. I had helped her develop the confidence to stand in her truth, regardless of what anyone else thought. When I picked Emma up from school that afternoon, she bounded to the car with her usual enthusiasm, backpack bouncing against her small frame. Mom, guess what? Ms. Peterson chose my story to be in the school anthology, she exclaimed as she climbed into the back seat. That's wonderful, sweetheart. The one about the girl who builds a rocket ship? She nodded vigorously. Yeah, and she said my dialogue was particularly authentic, whatever that means. It means your characters talk like real people, I explained, pulling away from the curb. That's a big compliment. Emma beamed, then looked thoughtful. Mom, can we invite Aunt Kiara for dinner this weekend? I want to show her my story. Of course. I'll text her tonight. And... Emma hesitated, fidgeting with her seatbelt. Do you think maybe Grandma would want to come too? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, caught off guard by her question. I'm not sure, Emma. Things are a bit complicated with Grandma right now. I know, she said quietly. But maybe if she came to our house, she could see that we're okay, that we're happy. Maybe that would help her understand. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. While I had been thinking of my mother's silence as a respite, a chance to recover from years of judgment, Emma was seeing it as an opportunity for reconciliation. Not because she needed my mother's approval, she had made that abundantly clear at the shower, but because she had compassion for her grandmother's limited perspective. We can invite her, I said after a moment. She might not come, but we can extend the invitation. Emma smiled, satisfied. Thanks, Mom. That evening, after Emma was in bed, I sat on the edge of my own bed staring at my phone. The thought of calling my mother made my stomach knot, but I knew I needed to be the one to reach out. Not for my sake, but for Emma's. She deserved to. Have her request honored even if nothing came of it. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. Hello? Hi, Mom. It's Sophia. A pause. I know. I have caller ID. Of course she did. I took a deep breath. Emma has asked if you'd like to come to dinner this weekend. Kiara's coming, and Emma wants to show you both a story she wrote that's being published in the school anthology. Another, longer pause. I could almost hear her weighing her options, calculating her response. This Saturday? She finally asked. Yes, around 6. Just dinner? No? Agenda? I almost laughed at the absurdity of her question, as if Emma's invitation was some kind of trap. Just dinner, Mom. And Emma sharing her accomplishment with her family. All right, she said, her tone neutral. I'll be there. Should I bring anything? Now it was my turn to pause. The question was so normal, so oddly domestic, that it caught me off guard. Just yourself is fine. 6 o'clock then, she confirmed, and hung up without saying goodbye. I set down my phone, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and hope. My mother was coming to dinner, the same mother who had publicly humiliated me and called my daughter a bastard just 3 weeks ago. The rational part of me said this was a terrible idea, that nothing good could come from inviting her back into our space so soon. But another part, the part that still remembered moments of connection before everything went wrong, the part that recognized Emma's wisdom in offering this olive branch, felt a cautious sense of possibility. Saturday arrived with a flurry of activity. Emma was up early, insisting on helping me clean the apartment and prepare for dinner. We decided on a simple meal: pasta with my homemade sauce, garlic bread, a fresh salad, and brownies for dessert. Nothing fancy, but comforting and plentiful. Should I put the nice tablecloth on? Emma asked, already pulling it from the drawer. Sure, I agreed, watching as she carefully spread it over our small dining table. Do you want to make place cards too? Her face lit up. Yes. Can I use the special markers? As she settled at the kitchen counter with paper and my set of calligraphy markers, I felt a surge of tenderness. She was putting so much care into this dinner, treating it as a special occasion rather than the potentially awkward reunion it was likely to be. Kiara arrived first, cradling her now enormous belly. I swear I've grown another inch since yesterday, she groaned, lowering herself carefully onto the couch. Emma rushed to her aunt, placing her small hand on Kiara's stomach. Hi, baby Amara, she cooed. It's your cousin Emma. As I watched them together, I felt a pang of gratitude for Kiara's courage in standing up for us after the shower. Our relationship had deepened in the weeks since, phone calls and text messages flowing more freely, conversations more honest than they had been in years. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. My mother had always been punctual to a fault. I'll get it, Emma called, racing to the door before I could move. I exchanged a glance with Kiara, who gave me an encouraging nod. We could hear Emma's cheerful greeting, followed by my mother's more reserved response. They appeared in the living room doorway, Emma leading my mother by the hand, looking pleased with herself. My mother seemed smaller somehow, less imposing, than I remembered. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small gift bag. Hello, Marlene, I said, using her first name deliberately, a small assertion of our new dynamic. Sophia, she replied with a nod. Kiara. She handed the gift bag to Emma. This is for you. A small congratulations on your story being selected. Emma's eyes widened. Thank you, Grandma. She peeked inside the bag and gasped. Mom, look! It's a beautiful journal. She pulled out a leather-bound notebook, the cover embossed with delicate flowers. My mother shifted awkwardly. I thought you might want somewhere special to write your stories, she explained, since you have a talent for it. Emma threw her arms around my mother's waist in an impulsive hug. I love it. Thank you. I noticed my mother's hands hovering uncertainly before settling lightly on Emma's back. Not quite embracing her, but not pushing her away either. Progress, perhaps, or at least not regression. Dinner was surprisingly normal. We talked about safe topics, Emma's school projects, Kiara's nursery preparations, a new exhibit, at the library where I worked. My mother was quieter than usual, offering short responses rather than dominating the conversation, as she typically did at family gatherings. After we finished eating, Emma proudly presented copies of her story for each of us to read. It was a sweet tale about a girl who builds a spaceship in her backyard to visit the stars, because her father had told her before he died that he would become the brightest star in the sky. I glanced at my mother as she read, watching her expression, carefully. She maintained her composure, but I saw her swallow hard at several points. "This is very good, Emma," she said when she finished, her voice slightly strained. "You have a gift with words." Emma beamed. "Thanks, Grandma. Ms. Peterson says I have a unique perspective. I think it's because of my dad. Mom tells me stories about him all the time, so it's like I know him even though he's not here." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. In the past, any mention of James would have been met with my mother's tight-lipped disapproval or a swift change of subject. We all seemed to be holding our breath, waiting for her reaction. "Your father's name was James, wasn't it?" my mother said finally, surprising us all. Emma nodded eagerly. "James Alexander Taylor. Mom says I have his eyes and his laugh." "You do," my mother acknowledged quietly. "I remember his laugh. It was distinctive." I nearly dropped my fork. In all the years since James's death, my mother had never, not once, referred to him directly or acknowledged remembering anything about him. Emma, seemingly unaware of the monumental nature of this small concession, continued happily. "Do you want to see more pictures of him? Mom and I found a whole box of them. He played guitar and wrote songs and had a dog named Einstein when he was my age." My mother glanced at me, a question in her eyes. I nodded slightly, giving permission for this conversation to continue. "Perhaps another time," she said to Emma. "It's getting late, and I should be going soon." Emma's face fell slightly, but she rallied quickly. "Okay, but next time you come over, I'll show you. I even have a recording of him singing. It's my favorite thing to listen to when I miss him." As I walked my mother to the door after dinner, I braced myself for whatever critique might be coming, about my apartment being too small, or my pasta sauce needing more basil, or Emma being too forward with her questions. Instead, my mother paused at the threshold and turned to face me, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "She's a remarkable child," she said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "She is." "You've done well with her, Sophia, despite everything." It wasn't quite an apology, not even close, but it was the closest thing to approval I had heard from her in nearly a decade. "Thank you," I said simply. She nodded once, then walked to her car without looking back. I closed the door and leaned against it, processing what had just happened. It wasn't a reconciliation, not yet. Perhaps not ever, in the full sense of the word. But it was an acknowledgement of Emma's worth, of my capabilities as a mother, of James's existence in our lives. For now, that was enough. In the months that followed, small shifts continued to reshape our family landscape. Kiara gave birth to baby Amara, a beautiful girl with a full head of dark hair and a temperament as sweet as her mother's. Emma was enchanted with her cousin, insisting on regular visits to help take care of the baby. My mother maintained a careful distance, not returning to her previous pattern of criticism, but not fully embracing us either. She attended Amara's christening, nodded politely when she saw us, even asked about Emma's progress at school. It was a delicate truce, fraught with unspoken tensions and unresolved hurts, but it was sustainable, livable. More importantly, I found myself caring less about her approval with each passing day. The desperate need to be validated by her, a need that had shaped so much of my adult life, was fading, replaced by a steadier sense of my own worth. One evening in late spring, almost 6 months after the baby shower, I sat on our small balcony watching Emma water the container garden we had planted together. Sunlight caught in her curls, turning them to copper and gold. She was humming too, herself, a tune I recognized as one of James's songs, completely absorbed in her task, content in her own company. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mrs. Chen, my mother's longtime friend from church, asking if Emma and I would be interested in joining a mother-daughter book club she was organizing. Your insight would be valuable, she wrote, and Emma's perspective is always refreshing. I smiled, typing back a quick acceptance. Since the shower, Mrs. Chen had made a point of reaching out periodically, inviting us to various events, stopping to chat when we ran into each other at the grocery store. It felt like being welcomed back into a community I hadn't realized I missed. "Mom, look," Emma called, pointing excitedly at one of our pots. "The sunflower is starting to bloom." I joined her at the railing, admiring the bright yellow petals just beginning to unfurl. "It's beautiful," I said. "You've done a great job taking care of it." "We did," she corrected, leaning against me. "It's our garden." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, savoring the warmth of her small body against mine. "Our garden," I agreed. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, I found myself drawn to the shoebox of memories we had explored together after the shower. I sat cross-legged on my bed and opened it, no longer feeling the sharp pain that had previously accompanied this ritual. Among the photos and letters and mementos, I found a small notebook I had forgotten about, a journal I had kept in the months after James died. I opened it cautiously, unsure what raw grief might pour from its pages. To my surprise, alongside the expected anguish, I found moments of unexpected hope. Emma smiled today, a real smile, not just gas. James would have been over the moon. I told her about him, about how his eyes crinkled when he laughed, just like hers do. Took Emma to the park for the first time, sat on a bench and imagined James beside me, pointing out dogs and clouds and interesting people. I think I'm learning how to carry him with us, how to make him present even in his absence. Emma stood up today, pulled herself up on the coffee table and just stood there, looking so proud of herself. I cried. Of course. Both sad tears and happy ones. James should be here for this. But I'm here. I'm witnessing it all for both of us. Reading these entries, I was struck by the resilience of that younger version of myself. A woman barely out of girlhood, devastated by loss but determined to create a life of love for her daughter. She hadn't known how difficult the path ahead would be, how many judgments and rejections she would face, but she had put one foot in front of the other. Anyway, I had been stronger than I knew. On a fresh page at the back of the journal, I began to write, not to the past, but to the future. Dear Emma at 18, as I write this, you're 9 years old, asleep in your bedroom surrounded by books and stuffed animals and the glow-in-the-dark stars your Uncle David helped you stick to the ceiling. You're at an age where you still let me braid your hair and kiss your scraped knees, where you believe the world is fundamentally good despite the hard lessons you've already learned. By the time you read this, you'll be standing on the threshold of adulthood, preparing to step into a world that will sometimes embrace you and sometimes challenge you in ways I can't predict or prevent. You'll have formed your own opinions, developed your own beliefs, perhaps even chosen a path that surprises me. Whatever shape your life takes, I want you to know these truths. You come from love. Your father and I chose you, wanted you, celebrated your existence before we ever held you in our arms. His absence from your life was never by choice, and his love for you transcended even his death. You belong exactly as you are. There is no template you need to fit, no external approval you need to seek. The measures of success that others impose, be they academic achievements, physical appearance, or adherence to social expectations, are far less important than your own integrity, your capacity for compassion, your courage in standing for what you believe. Your voice matters. I've watched you stand up for yourself and for others, speaking truth even when it wasn't easy or popular. Never let anyone convince you to be silent when something matters to you. Forgiveness is strength, not weakness. The ability to extend grace to those who have hurt you, including sometimes me, is not about excusing wrong, but about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment. Forgive when you can, but never at the expense of your own well-being or dignity. You are enough. This world will try to convince you otherwise, that you need to be more, have more, achieve more to be worthy of love and respect. It's a lie. You were enough the day you were born, you're enough now, and you'll be enough every day of your life. I don't know what challenges you'll face as you grow. I can't smooth every path or protect you from every hurt, but I can promise you this. I will be here. To listen without judgment, to love without condition, to remind you of who you are when the world tries to make you forget. You, my extraordinary daughter, are the greatest gift of my life. Not a consolation prize for losing your father, not a burden I've carried, but the very center of my heart. The person who taught me what I'm capable of, what love really means. Carry that knowledge with you, whatever comes. All my love, Mom. I closed the journal, knowing I would add to this letter over the years, tucking away thoughts and wishes and observations for the young woman Emma would become. Not because she would need my wisdom, she was already wiser than I had been at twice her age, but because some truths bear repeating, especially in a world that tries so hard to make us doubt our own worth. The next morning, Emma and I walked hand in hand to her school, the spring air filled with the scent of new growth and possibility. At the school gate, she hugged me fiercely before joining the stream of children heading inside. "Love you, Mom," she called over her shoulder, her smile bright enough to eclipse any shadow of shame that had ever touched our lives. "Love you more," I called back, our daily ritual. As I walked home alone, I felt it again. That lightness, that sense of having put down a burden I was never meant to carry. The journey ahead would still have its challenges. There would be difficult conversations with my mother, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves, times when the absence of James would feel acutely painful. But I was no longer walking that path weighed down by shame, no longer seeing myself through the distorted lens of others' judgment. I was walking in the full light of truth, that I was enough, that Emma was a blessing, that our family of two was whole and valid and beautiful exactly as it was. That truth, once spoken, could never be unheard. And in that knowledge I found not just peace, but power. The power to rewrite the narrative of my life, not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to resilience, to unconditional love, to the strength that comes from standing firmly in your own story, whatever shape it takes. If my journey has taught me anything, it's this. Your worth is not determined by others' approval. Your family is valid, however it's formed. Your path is yours alone to walk, and the courage to stay true to it, especially when doing so is difficult, is perhaps the greatest gift you can give yourself and those you love. As for me and Emma, we were building our future one day, at a time, not perfect, not conventional, but authentic and filled with love. And in the end, isn't that what family is really about? Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.